Last year, the mass immigration debacle in Canada got so bad and so out of control that even Justin Trudeau announced that his government would be reversing course and capping population growth in Canada to get back to pre-pandemic levels.
In the last 2 years, our population has grown really fast, like baby boom fast. And increasingly, bad actors like fake colleges and big chain corporations have been exploiting our immigration system for their own interests. So we're doing something major. We're reducing the numbers of immigrants that will come to Canada for the next 3 years.
That was because poll after poll indicated that the majority of Canadians felt that immigration levels were far too high, putting a strain on Canada's housing market, job market, and social services. Is it really a coincidence that all of Canada's social services were reporting strains on the system at the same time that the federal government was importing millions of people into Canada at a rate faster than we had seen in decades? Immigration was poised to become one of the leading ballot box questions for many Canadians, but the specter of Donald Trump's tariffs and annexation threats completely derailed that, making the ballot box question undoubtedly which federal leader would be best to handle Donald Trump. I asked Canadian professor Eric Kaufmann, an immigration and demographics expert, if he was surprised at how immigration has been addressed so far in the federal campaign. Are you surprised at how immigration has been dealt with in this campaign?
Not really. I mean, I do think there was always a discomfort in the English-speaking elite with talking about this. There's been a taboo over discussing immigration in Canada for as long as I can remember, going back to the 80s. It's just one of those questions that you're just supposed to have one view on. Now, it did briefly, enter the media discourse and political parties said something about it, just so, oh, well, maybe we slipped up and let in too many. But there is this kind of discomfort. And so it's not surprising to me that, Quebec, where they can have a grown-up discussion about numbers because of their elite political culture is different. Whereas in English Canada, which actually has the much higher intake, ironically, there was no discussion in the leaders' debate. I think that was kind of deliberate.
We're now just a few days away from Election Day, and both the Conservative and Liberal parties have both released their election platforms. And so in this video, we're going to be comparing Mark Carney's immigration plans to Pierre Poilievre's immigration plans. Let's start with Mark Carney's plans. Mark Carney's plan explicitly states that Justin Trudeau's immigration rates were growing at a, quote, rapid and unsustainable pace, with housing and social infrastructure unable to keep up. So the plan begins with this: return immigration to sustainable levels, which according to the Liberals means capping international students and temporary workers to less than 5% of Canada's population by 2027. As of right now, with Canada's population at 41 million, 5% of that is over 2 million people. So if it's below 2 million, that is still a massive number of international students and temporary foreign workers. The next point in the Liberal plan is to stabilize permanent resident admissions at less than 1% of Canada's population annually, which would be 410,000. Now, to put that into perspective, the peak year of Stephen Harper's permanent residency intake was 260,000. Now, here is Professor Eric Kaufmann's take on the Liberal plan for international students and temporary foreign workers.
This whole temporary worker thing, it seems to be a marked feature of Canada. I mean, this idea that, I think it's based on this idea of sort of labor need. Anyone who can lobby the government gets to have workers. What that means is instead of innovating, instead of mechanizing, you're going to rely on cheap labor. It's astounding to me that any labor union wouldn't be foursquare against this. This is all about reducing wage costs, essentially importing poverty. It's hard for me to understand why this is not a major issue. I think it's not a major issue because the elite political culture suppresses it as an issue. The mainstream media keeps it away, as we see with the debates.
Right.
And unless Canadians can find a way to break through that, now normally what's happened in other Western countries, like if you take Britain or Netherlands, where the mainstream conservative parties don't handle this issue after promising to handle it, they're usually punished by voters switching to a populist alternative.
Now let's look at Pierre Poilievre's plan. Poilievre's plan also acknowledges the connection between the housing crisis and mass immigration. The Liberals' reckless and unsustainable immigration surge overwhelmed Canadian housing and healthcare services. The plan goes on to state, "We will restore integrity to the system by cracking down on fraud and dramatically reducing the number of temporary foreign workers and foreign students, and limiting permanent immigration to a sustainable rate similar to the levels under the Harper government." These measures include keeping the rate of population growth below the rate of housing growth, job growth, and healthcare accessibility. Poilievre has told reporters numerous times that his plan is to cap the permanent residency intake at 200 to 250,000 people per year. The plan goes on to state that a conservative government will reject the radical Century Initiative proposal, a plan to see Canada become a nation of 100 million people by the year 2100. It goes on that he would require union LMIA pre-checks so that if a foreign worker is to be hired in a unionized job, the union would be able to approve or deny that request. A conservative government would require criminal background checks for international students, process refugee claims faster on a last-in, first-out basis, and implement departure tracking, and expand and speed up removals for any criminal activity on a visitor permit. Kaufmann tells me that Poilievre's plan, although stronger, won't be enough to solve Canada's current issues. Do you think that that's enough to solve the immigration issues we're seeing in this country?
I really don't. I think the levels of immigration, even in the Harper years and going back through the Mulroney years and all these other Chrétien years, I mean, these were OECD leading levels already that had led Canada's foreign-born share to be, along with Australia, at the top end of the OECD. And I don't think, we've got a number of economists now that are pointing out that actually this is not a formula for, you have to look at GDP per capita. And when you look at GDP per capita, it's not at all clear that immigration benefits Canada on anything like this scale. So I think if you look at both platforms, they are both vastly in excess of what would, I think, be a sensible immigration policy. In Europe, I think, even though the parties have not delivered on their promises, I think they are at least talking about numbers that I think are more sustainable. In the UK case, 100,000, for example, for a country that's 50% larger than Canada. I just think the numbers are completely off base, even if we're going to backpedal from the crazy Trudeau 1.5 million. The whole temporary foreign worker thing, which doesn't, Britain doesn't really have that. There seems to be just a somewhat mild dialing back of it. So I just don't think there is any kind of what I would call a sane discussion in both parties. I don't think the Conservatives are willing to challenge the Liberals really and really say, no, we're going to reduce numbers down to, for example, 100,000, which would, to my mind, be a good starting point. Instead, it's only a question of whether you're going at 1% of the population, which is an enormous number, 400,000, or whether you're going slightly lower, maybe 300,000. So
Right.
Poilievre, who strikes me as more of a liberal conservative, more in the old Reaganite mold, is not really motivated on this issue, and therefore is in a way out of step with where conservatism is in other Western countries. It is not all about tax cuts. That is sort of an older narrative. Most of the West has moved beyond the old left-right economics to talking about these cultural questions of global versus national, and I don't feel that's happened in Canada yet.
Notably absent from both the Liberal and Conservative immigration platform is a plan to deport the potentially hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants living in Canada right now. Now, reports estimate that there could be 500,000 people living in this country illegally. Removing them as quickly as possible and restoring integrity to the system is absolutely critical, in my opinion, to solving these issues. But doing so would be a monumental task, requiring not only levels of political will that we're not seeing from anyone on the campaign, but also a serious plan put in place to make it happen. Now, when you compare the two plans, it is clear that the conservative plan is much stronger than the liberal plan. The conservatives want to have permanent residency intake of around 250,000 people per year, while 1% of the Canadian population would be over 400,000 per year. That's the liberal plan. So right there's a huge difference. When it comes to temporary workers and international students, while it isn't explicitly stated as to what Poilievre's number would be, he is far stronger on the issue when it comes to Mark Carney, as Mark Carney says that he would cap that figure at 5%. That's 2 million people. It's clear that immigration is a major source of the problem when it comes to the affordability crisis. That's why both parties have stated in their platform that immigration and the housing crisis are basically one and the same. There is an explicit connection. So immigration is a huge issue in this country. It may in fact be, besides the Donald Trump tariffs, the top issue. So how do you feel immigration has been addressed so far in this campaign? Are the leaders speaking to your concerns? Do you feel like your concerns are being addressed and are being heard? Let me know in the comments what you think of the immigration policies being proposed by the Conservative Party and the Liberal Party, and if immigration is the ballot box question for you. But that will be all for today. Thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe to this channel, and if you enjoyed this video, leave a like as well. Bye for now.